Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Ridge Community Church podcast. My name is John. I'm one of the pastors at the Ridge, and our vision is to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. So we want to bring you something hopeful and helpful for your everyday life, whether you've been following Jesus for a while or you're still trying to figure out exactly what you do believe about God. Now, you'll find on this podcast things that'll help with conversations about marriage and parenting and mental health and work, practical things to help you in your faith journey, and a lot more. So whether you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app or you're watching on YouTube, be sure to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the hopeful and helpful conversations. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast. I'm really excited to share a really good conversation that I got to have with licensed professional counselor Lisa Zwagerman. Lisa and I chat through the topic of comparison and how it really hurts our joy. It can cause anxiety, depression, and so many other mental health effects that impact not just ourselves, but also our relationships. In our conversation, we talk about, hey, what is the real impact of comparison? Why do we all really struggle with it? What can we do about it? What are some practical steps? As well as how do you help avoid your kids developing this comparison? And how do you encourage them if that's something and that they may be struggling with? This is my conversation with Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for coming out of the Ridge Podcast.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. We think we got a pretty fun conversation today that hopefully is helpful, but hopefully doesn't make everybody feel a little bit of self-recognition right away instantly, which I feel like it can, because we're talking about comparison. And I know that a couple weeks ago in our services, Oak Creek Franklin pastor Forrest talked about this topic in detail. So maybe you may throw some one-liners, but oh yeah, he mentioned this really well. And so if anybody's listening and they're like, oh, what's being referred to? That's the thing. But maybe first off, as we think about this kind of idea of comparison, I know that you've probably had a lot of conversations with clients about this as they've wrestled through these things. But why do you think it is something that really almost everybody struggles with to one degree or another?
Yeah, I think when we talk about comparisons, it is a very natural human tendency, because if you think about the fact that we're often trying to find our place, right? From being a youth to middle-age, career, all of that, we are constantly figuring out, are we on our path? Are we on the right plan? Who am I? All of these questions. And I think oftentimes when we are looking to answer those kinds of questions of who we are, what are we doing, we look to other people, right? And so we look to other people maybe directly in our lives. Maybe that's family. Maybe that is colleagues, friends. And so it kind of is this natural occurring thing to want to compare, what am I doing, to what are the people around me doing, or what are the people doing that I think I want to become kind of like. And so it's this natural desire to want to find our place using comparison in a way.
Now, I imagine there's probably like a healthy zone where that fits in, where it's like really natural and almost healthy to be like, yeah, I see this person succeeding maybe in this athletic thing. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to change maybe how, like, my style of training or something like that in order to like work towards that as a goal, and almost like a really healthy, inspirational type of form. But I imagine, as once again, as I'm sure everyone can connect with, there's a line that crosses where it stops becoming healthy. How do you know if maybe you've crossed that line?
Yeah, I think that when we do compare ourselves with others, it can quickly become this negative loop where we find ourselves kind of stuck, either thinking that we're lesser than others or specific people or person, or sometimes on the flip side, thinking that we're way better than somebody else. And so it's like this negative loop of not necessarily actually focusing on ourselves and what we're doing, but focusing outward on what other people are doing and how we're not comparing or not kind of doing the same thing that they are. So I think that line is sort of, are we using comparison to focus on ourselves and maybe bettering ourselves towards our goals, or are we using comparison to kind of deflate ourselves or deflate others? And I think that is when it becomes probably an unhealthy place to be.
Is there anything that somebody could do to kind of recognize if that's a habit that's happening in their life?
Yeah, I think again, if it becomes this like daily feeling where you're kind of in this loop, right? Um, oh, I'm just not meeting, I'm just not leveling up, I'm just not where I need to be, I'm not meeting that goal because look what that person is doing, or a constant like, I'm way better, I don't need to do anything. And so if it's maybe more time spent thinking I'm not where I need to be versus, I am who I am and I'm going to do things to make sure I'm taking the path forward for me. So I would say if more time is spent comparing yourself to others than actually focusing inward, then it's probably not a great, not a healthy place to be in.
Yeah. And so and maybe from like a broad stroke standpoint, we can talk about what really is the like mental health impact when you find yourself comparing a lot. Because I think that I would guess that people have like a general idea of like, oh, it's not good for me. I probably shouldn't do that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be, keeping up with the Joneses, that mentality. I know the phrases and things like that, but how really is it affecting people's mental health?
Well, yeah. So if someone is constantly comparing themselves to others, and constantly trying to figure out and measure their self-worth by what other people are doing or what other folks' abilities or circumstances are, it can often lead to negative mental health outcomes. So you can see, it could eventually lead into like some depression, anxiety, some low self-esteem, I think. And, comparison, it is such a natural human tendency for everybody, particularly young people. Um, but when it's done in this excessive or negative way, then it ultimately has some negative outcomes on our mental well-being. So again, kind of can increase anxiety, can increase some depression, and really ultimately just kind of decreases people's self-esteem.
I know one of the things that I've heard really closely associated with that is just people having a hard time experiencing joy or happiness because they're comparing what they have or who they are with what other people have. And most often, I feel like that kind of concept gets looped in with social media.
Mm.
And I'm curious, do you feel like social media gets fairly blamed for that comparison? I have a guess as your answer. But maybe why or why not?
Yeah, I do. I think social media is an easy scapegoat to blame. But I do think it also often fuels that. It's so readily accessible, right? You can so easily go onto any number of socials and see, oh, this ideal image, whether it's a body image thing, whether it's a career driven thing, whether it's I have X, Y, and Z sort of thing. It's like all this idealized living. And we can even struggle with that when we know people present their best and probably oftentimes not even accurate portrayal of themselves on social media. And so when you think about our own brains and how we process imagery and information, it just so quickly becomes this like, oh, they have that, well, I want that, right? And so then we kind of can creep into this like jealousy, envy, which is not a great place to be either when it comes to self-satisfaction, life satisfaction, gratitude. And again, I do think, yes, social media is an easy scapegoat for this. Like this comparison is nothing new, right?
Right.
This was humans have been dealing with this for years and years before there was social media. But I don't think it necessarily helps a lot of folks with their self-esteem unless you are very cognizant. And this is always kind of my like spiel with social media. If you find that after you are consuming your social media, if you're feeling more fulfilled about yourself, more fulfilled with who you're meant to be, then maybe you are, maybe it is good. But if you're feeling like garbage after you're, scrolling your socials, then I think probably maybe follow different people or take a break from it. Uh, that's kind of my spiel with social media.
That's really good. I love the kind of the self-reflection and taking stock of like, how did this make me feel? It may even be helpful. I've heard about people doing, if they're willing to put in a little bit of work related to social media, where they rank themselves. They'll like, in terms of a mood thing, they'll be like, oh, I'm going to give myself a scale of 1 to 10 about how I feel, after I use social media. So they'll do now it depends on each person's like maybe personality type or how they kind of go about these kind of process. But I think that could be a really interesting, helpful tool that I've heard of ranking how you feel. And then if there are certain points or after certain activities, that could be a good indicator.
Yeah, I think that's a really great practice. I also want to encourage people to, when when you're looking at different social media accounts, and maybe it's someone who, oh, this person's life is very much like mine, but they're just doing it so much better. I almost want to encourage people to kind of like have a little mind shift and be like, that's so great for them, like that it's working out for them, as opposed to this, like, well, why am I not that way? Right. So are we appreciating other folks and how they're living their life and becoming curious about that? Right. And that almost support is more like supporting them and supporting me, because like I'm great with them doing that. I don't have to change, my day-to-day life to be like them, because I need to be me, who I am. So,
I heard that as like a leadership principle. I know it's not the topic of this conversation, but I heard that like years ago as a leadership principle of, are you able to celebrate the wins of the people that you're working with?
right.
And if
Right.
you're not, then you might have to do some hard heart checks, because there's something underneath the inability to be like excited for people when something positive happens to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yes. Yes. And it's something important for people to reflect on this, this thought of, oh, they have, and so therefore I don't have because they have it. And that's not truth, right? And that's not a healthy place to be in with it either. So,
yeah. It's even wild that you say that some of the things you see are not real, or like the idealized version of that. I learned once that, when you think about an ad, like the ice cream they use in ads is often mashed potatoes that they've painted. Right. And yet I look at that and it still looks like delicious ice cream. Right. And so it's like, something can be fake. You can know it's fake. Every time I see an ice cream ad now, I think about that. And yet it still makes me want ice cream.
Right.
And
right.
so,
how confusing for our minds. Right.
Yeah. And so I think that, especially as you think through the lens of people experiencing maybe even social media for the first time, like kids, students, youth, whatever, who maybe haven't, like, I know it, and yet it still happens, right? And so what's happening in the mind of somebody who hasn't even realized yet, those are photoshopped images of those people that,
totally,
so that they look this perfect way, or you see before and after pics. And I've heard this thing about how a lot of times they take the before pic after they take the other pic, because what they do is they take like their dehydrated form pic and then they like drink a bunch of chocolate milk or whatever and then make it look like it's more impressive. And there's just so many advertising tricks that happen. So maybe we could shift a little bit into talking about kids and youth as it comes to social media or in general. Do you feel like you have any helpful things for that?
Yeah, and I think it's so important to talk about, again, with grace and respect for one another, because I think a lot of parents are wanting support. They're wanting to have conversations, but they feel like, oh my gosh, I can't say this because I don't know the answer. Like I don't I don't know what to do for my kid, but I just like want to encourage parents, adults that are in kids' lives, like keep having conversations with the other adults in your life from, from a standpoint of giving grace, receiving grace, and allowing yourself to be both all of those things. But yeah, particularly with young people, they're just so malleable. They're so everything that they see, they take in, and they're like, oh, do I need to be doing that? Or this person has that, and I think I need to do that. And oftentimes they're seeing things for the first time, and as the adults in their life, we get to help them understand what that is, right? And one of the things I like to say to my kids in particular, and then to other parents, is like, remind your kids that like there's nothing under the sun that you're not aware of from an adult perspective. So like keep encouraging your kids to come to you, to ask questions. And if they don't know what's going on, you two can figure it out together, right? But in the arena of comparisons, and kids really, they really get into that, right? School is starting now. They're going to come home and say, well, so-and-so has these shoes and this backpack, and why don't I? Do I need that even? Or they've got a phone and I don't have a phone. My parents say I don't need a phone. Lots of phone talk, lots of technology talk. And again, I think it's just really important as the adults in that child's life is that you are confident in your stance, but you communicate to them that the guidelines are there because you love them and you care for them and you're responsible for raising them into being adults, right? So like there's this saying, we're not in the business of raising up happy kids. We're in the business of raising happy adults. And we know that adults get to where they need to be when they have loving boundaries set for them. So that's a little side trail, but I think it all kind of works together in like the fact that helping kids understand when they start to compare themselves to other kids or things that they see on TV, movies, maybe social media, if they have, some of that in their lives, is to help them remember that, again, some of the stuff is not real, right? And so we want to be able to bring that truth into life with them. And then also some of the stuff doesn't actually matter. So like focusing on the things that really matter in your life, that you are a kind human. If your family is Bible believing, Christ believing, you are a child of God, you are loved. And these are the things that you need to focus on, and helping them find healthy avenues for taking in maybe, what are the people around me doing and how do I grow in that, or how do I, develop myself in that. I just think it's, again, the parent, you can guide them. They need our help to get to where they need to be.
Are there questions that you can ask that you feel like are helpful to provide that framework of either processing or figuring out, maybe even if that's something that your child or kid that you're mentoring is struggling with?
Yeah, I think, and like you said at the beginning of this, so Pastor Forrest talked about some of this a couple weeks ago, and he really brought in the aspect of gratitude, right? So if we can ground ourselves in what we have and what's going on for us in the day, and bringing in, two kids, like, well, let's think about what we have today, and let's be thankful for those things, and let's write them down and just be aware of what we have. That can be really helpful for kids. And then also, like when they're taking in things and they're not really sure what's going on, or they're comparing and saying, I need this, I need that, you can really talk to them and say, well, what do you think you need that for? Like, what do you think the purpose of that person doing that is? Because I have some thoughts and some opinions, and let's kind of, talk through some of that together.
I imagine there's got to be an element that, kids are listening all the time, right? I've heard so many parents tell me that, like my kids were listening even when I was like, oh, why were they listening to me say that thing? How'd they learn that new word?
Hmm. I,
Yeah. And I imagine that there's a lot of, and I don't mean this in a way to like put more on parents, because I know parents are always doing the best, absolute best they can. They want the best for their children.
yeah,
They're doing everything they can. And, um, but at the same time, I feel like there's an element of the way that you talk around your kids, or even just the way you process your own challenges of comparison. Um, is
for
there
sure.
some idea that like this is something that you really do need to like be working on for yourself as well, rather than just trying to instill it upon your kids?
Oh, yes. So thankful you brought that up because I think that is 100% the best place to start. I think that's the goal, right? Is that our kids see us or the children in our lives who we know we have influence over. They see us how we respond to others. They see how we maybe use social media and they see how we use movies and that sort of thing. And that is the easiest way that kids learn is right. They are watching the adults in their life. And so if you can embrace that and say like, yeah, the way I'm going to talk to other people, the way I'm going to interact with my phone, the way I'm going to interact with my colleagues or my family, my siblings, I'm going to treat them with respect and love them. And then from a comparison standpoint, right? As an adult, I'm going to observe what others are doing and I'm going to be thankful for how God made them and thankful
Mm,
for what they are doing and what they are pursuing in their life and not necessarily feel like I need to do that, but I'm going to support them. I'm going to talk about
mm,
how cool it is, the things that they're doing. And I think that can be a great example for kids. I know a couple of our kids are really competitive, like fiercely competitive, um, almost about everything. And I do think that, you know, there is something healthy about competition, right? It fuels us to want to be better. It fuels us on sports teams, even professionally sometimes. But it can, again, there's this fine line of what is healthy with this competition and what then becomes unhealthy.
mm.
And so that's another thing I think that is good to talk with kids about in kind of in this same, you know, comparison, competition conversation. And how are we as adults like representing that in a healthy way to them
Yeah.
can really be effective and powerful, I
Yeah.
think.
That's really good. I feel like I feel like competitiveness is a value that's, highly valued, or a characteristic that's really highly valued. And, I mean, particularly, I mean, you see it so often in the world of sports, which, I think often, you know, athletes are put up on a pedestal as role models. And at times that can be a really helpful, great thing. And at times it can, I don't want to say backfire, but, can backfire, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
there's so much emphasis placed on competitiveness and being better. And there's got to be a line where that just becomes more hurtful
Yeah.
than it is helpful.
Yeah. And I think even when we use terms like being better or do better, like it, it works more effectively to define that. Well, what does be better mean? Right. Like, and we're
Mm,
constantly doing that in our household of like, well, no, you got to do it better. Okay. But what does do better mean? What does that look like? Well, it means that you're going to take initiative to unload the dishes or you're going to take initiative. Right. And so anytime we can be very clear about what that is, I think can be very helpful. I was thinking too about with competition, and I think a lot of parents and adults can fall into this, and I've seen this a lot again with like social media and what are we portraying and that sort of thing. That a lot of young parents can often fall into almost when they become parents. This like competitive nature of like, okay, this is what we're doing for our baby and this and that. And it becomes this, again, this area of, oh, wait, well, like, I'm not doing that. So I must not be doing it right. Or, they're doing this, their baby's doing that, or their kid's doing that, and I must not be doing it right. When again, it's like God has a plan and a way for each of us to be. We're not all meant to be the same. We're absolutely meant to be different and live our different lives. But we can support each other through the way we do things differently and like appreciate those characteristics.
Yeah, so I feel like we've you've shared a couple of ideas and elements, I think, of how do you fight this comparison. You mentioned that the gratitude piece, and then mentioned celebrating others. Is there other pieces, just maybe in general? Doesn't have to be specific with kids, although it may naturally transition to that as you kind of, as parents, interpret it for their kids, but things that anybody can do to help fight the comparison trap that maybe they get stuck into.
Yeah, I think there's like three big things that I would focus on. The first one we kind of have talked about a little bit, which is gratitude. And an easy way to do that is I think Forrest said this, right first thing in the morning, write down three things that you're grateful for in your day. Can set you on a path in the morning that's going to be really positive and great. And that can work at all ages, right? Kids can do that. Adults can do that. The other thing is challenging inaccurate perceptions of yourself and of others, right? Again, so inaccurate perceptions of self and others. So that's like what we see oftentimes on social media or what we envision somebody's life to be, right? You see somebody maybe a couple different hours of the day and wow, they've got it all together. Well, chances are they don't always have it all together because nobody does, right? So like challenge those perceptions and remind yourself like, okay, I know they're human, I'm human, and we're all just, we're doing our best here. So that's the second one, challenging inaccurate perceptions of yourself and of others. And then the third one is bringing in comparison, but compare yourself to your past self. So this works as an adult more so than with kids, right?
Sure.
So
yeah.
Take a look at where you are now and think about where you were 10 years ago, right? So this may be more difficult for some depending on how the path of your life has gone. Sure. But I do think it's super helpful. And I'm not talking about like, okay, I'm getting to be middle-aged now. And I think about like, oh yeah, 20 years ago, I was a lot better at running or this or that, right? Like don't slip into like thinking about the
needed a little bit less Advil, right?
Yeah, right. Don't think about like the glory days of your athleticism, if that was ever a thing for you. But I'm talking about thinking about maybe when you were that age, when you were in your, your formative years or your early adulthood, and you're like, man, someday I want to have a job. Maybe I want to have a family. Maybe I want to have some kids, or, I want to have a loving relationships in my family. And then like, look at where you are now. And the growth oftentimes, even if it's small, is there. And I think those can be really powerful things to reflect on. So comparing oneself now to your past self, and hopefully that brings in some level of fulfillment and realizing how much you've done and how much growth you've had.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like in all three of those things that you mentioned, they do require a little bit of work and thought process, right? You don't accidentally stop comparing, which is like true with everything in life, right?
Yeah, but, for sure.
Don't we want that though? Don't we want to stop the cycle? I think that's, recognizing it that it's happening. And then I think taking tangible steps is almost reassuring in that there are solutions to fight a very natural thing and kind of frame it in a more helpful way. But yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
If someone, they're listening and maybe they just kind of consistently feel not enough because of comparison, what might be some encouragement or just a first step that you might give them?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I would say just that. So, like, those feelings are really normal. We all struggle with feeling inadequate, and we all struggle with comparing and feeling bad about ourselves. We all struggle with feelings of not enough. And sometimes you have to just kind of remind yourself of your worth, of your self-worth. I also encourage people, like, if you are really struggling with this, like, tell a friend. Like, tell a friend, like, hey, I really am, like, struggling and I don't feel good about myself, like, ever. And if you can reach out and tell somebody that, most likely they're going to remind you that you have self-worth, that they appreciate you in their life. They're going to be able to help you realize that the things that you have done and that you do and that you are an important person. And that would be one thing I would say to, so if somebody is reaching out to you and saying these things, you don't have to necessarily jump right into saying, like, oh, no, let's be positive. Let's look on the bright side. There's a place there for empathy, right? There's a place to validate people's feelings if they really are not feeling great. And that can sometimes go farther than just pushing them into joyfulness.
Mm.
Because being with somebody when they feel bad is sometimes more important than telling them positive things. But yeah, again, if you are that person and you are feeling less than and not enough, I would encourage you to talk to somebody about it. And again, one step at a time. We know things that make us kind of feel better oftentimes, self-care activities. So, does it help for you to step outside and take a walk? Does it help for you to maybe take some of these steps as we've discussed, practicing gratitude, some reflection on what all the things you have done in life? And yeah,
Yeah.
so that would be just some of my thoughts on that.
I did not tee you up at all for this question, but I'm super curious about it. So hopefully you'll humor me.
I'm sweating.
Yeah. uh, it I know part of this can relate to just like how somebody maybe focuses on a specific issue or item and really can't stop maybe like thinking about that thing. Maybe it relates like, then there's like so much to unpack even in that concept. I get it. Cause that could be related to body image or work success or whatever. But maybe it's like, there's a thought in their mind. They just can't stop thinking about it. And, is there any tools? Is there any like thoughts to help you stop thinking or focusing on that specific item so much when it affects you so greatly?
Mm. Yeah, I think that is a great question. And I think it is something that a lot of people do struggle with. And sometimes we call that rumination, right? So you
Oh,
get kind
yes.
of stuck in this, right? So you ruminate on something, you continue to think of it. In this, we would call it like it's this negative loop. You get
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuck, do, to do, to do, to
Yeah.
do, and you just keep thinking about it. And the more you try to not think about it, you think about it more. The more you try to change, it just sticks with you. And I think most of the time, just taking a step away from, so say it's a friend who you are constantly kind of comparing yourself to. Maybe you need to like take a step back and just again challenge what may potentially be an inaccurate perception of either yourself or that person. Oftentimes we talk about challenging thoughts that come into our mind, right? So what if questions, we answer those by bringing in the truth in the situation. So, well, what if this person doesn't like me anymore because my shoes are blue? Well, what if that is the case? If that person doesn't like you because your shoes are blue, chances are that that person might not be the best person that you want to be around, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess that's kind of a long answer, but again, when you're feeling stuck in that loop, in that negative loop, sometimes asking yourself these questions, these like what if questions, answering them, and then realizing if that's the answer, what does that mean about like the relationship that's in my life? Is that something that I should continue to pour energy into, or is it perhaps something I need to be kind of taking a break from?
That's really good. I feel
one
like
thought on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like taking a step back from that thought process, and almost like really analyzing it, right? And really like actually thinking about the thought process itself rather than letting the thought kind of continue to run, can be really helpful. So thank you. I know I put you on the spot with that question. That's probably
that's okay.
It's probably a whole podcast in and of itself is on.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing about thoughts too is, one way to challenge them is you can always remind yourself like thoughts are just thoughts, right? Our behaviors don't have to come out of a thought. Like we can have all kinds of thoughts, and we have all kinds of thoughts in our minds. Doesn't mean that we have to act on every single one of them. So that's probably something a lot of people have heard as well, right? Our thoughts are thoughts. We have the choice to control our behavior and what we do with that. So
that's really good. All this has been so good and helpful, Lisa. Thank you so much for taking some time to share and dive into this. I could probably ask you about 100 more questions, but I won't. I'll spare you. And thank you so much for joining us and helping us out. Really wrestle with this, I think, topic that, like I said, everybody struggles with, but we don't always know how to stop doing it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, that was my conversation with Lisa, and I'm just so thankful for her sharing some insights into comparison, which is something that we all really naturally struggle with, and some things that we can do really practically to do it. So I'd advise you pick one of the 3 things that she mentioned as a takeaway. One thing that I'm going to really focus on is really taking some time to challenge the reality of things that I may see or believe about myself. I think that can be a really helpful process. Now, I would be remiss. I know that part of our conversation dealt with this idea of self-esteem and self-worth. And so I just want to offer encouragement. If that is something that you're struggling with and you really are wrestling with that, I do want to say that there is a God out there, Jesus, who loves you so immensely and thinks you are so valuable and worthwhile that he came to earth and he gave his life to show you, to show everyone just how much he cares for you. And so if that's something that you've never heard about, it's not something that you've had a chance to learn about or reflect on, I just want to encourage you. I've got some links in the show notes you can check out to learn more just about how God views you and just how much he really does care about you. And so that can be something that I know that I rest on whenever I maybe battle with some ideas about self-esteem and self-value, is just knowing how deeply Jesus loves and values me. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ridge Podcast. And please subscribe, maybe share this conversation with somebody that you think you could use it, because I don't want anybody to miss these hopeful and helpful conversations.